Supposedly, the Phoenix Suns are holding up this year's NBA trade deadline. In this video, I'm going to preview the trade deadline for the Phoenix Suns, talk about what I see them doing. I'll have a couple of trade ideas at the end of this thing, and we'll interview Gabe Guerrero from Suns Valley Podcast. This is another installment in NBA trade deadline previews that I'm doing here on NBA Uprise, so subscribe so you don't miss any of those. I dropped one on the Toronto Raptors, who are also major players at this year's NBA trade deadline, but the Phoenix Suns supposedly have contingency plans upon contingency plans. It'll be fascinating to watch the Phoenix Suns at this year's NBA trade deadline, and I'm going to get into why. First, as of this recording, the Suns are at 500. They've been pretty average on both sides of the ball, but that's because they've been very injury prone. Devin Booker's missed a lot of time, Chris Paul's missed time, DeAndre Ayton and head coach Monty Williams have argued, and this organization is going through a lot right now. They're deep into the tax right now, but that doesn't seem to be an issue for new owner Matt Ishbia. Now let's take a look at that luxury tax paying payroll. The Suns are paying Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and Chris Paul a combined $92 million approximately this season. Then you got Mikal Bridges, fresh on a new extension at $21 million. And then you got some pretty hefty mid-range salaries. Jay Crowder's making $10 mil, Landry Shamet almost $10 mil, Dario Saric $9 million, and then you got Cam Johnson making about $6 million, Torrey Craig making $5 million. These contracts are all very important because they could be put together in different combinations in order to match salary for a highly paid star. Jay Crowder hasn't played all season. He's on the way out, whether that's via trade or buyout. And you can combine him, Dario Saric, and Cam Payne to get up to $25 million in outgoing salary. You throw Landry Shamet on top of that, and that gets up to about $35 million in outgoing salary. Meanwhile, you have the contract extension of Cam Johnson looming over this team. There is a chance that Cam Johnson gets moved at this year's trade deadline, but just like with the rest of the Suns' potential moves, it'll be interesting to see if it's in combination with other players for something better, or if he's moved for a pick, or even a lesser player on a more cost-controlled contract in order to save on that luxury tax bill. It seems like the Suns are definitely buyers, but how they go about this trade deadline is still up in the air. Here are some other salaries. Damian Lee's been a steal on that minimum contract. He's been phenomenal for the Suns this year. Meanwhile, Josh Okogie has been playing some solid offensive ball lately. He's always been a good defensive piece, but has started to find his three-point shot. These two guys can fill rotation spots for the Suns and take over minutes for other guys that are traded. As far as the Suns draft pick status, it's as simple as it gets. They don't have any future picks from other teams, and they haven't traded any of their future picks. So the Suns can hypothetically put 4 future first-round picks in play in 2023, 2025, 2027, and 2029 in order to go out and get the star that they covet. Due to the Stepien rule, you can't trade picks in back-to-back years. You have to have 1 first-round draft pick in at least every 2 seasons. That's why you can only trade 4 every other year. The Suns could also hypothetically trade pick swaps in between those years because they'd still have a first-round pick. So the Suns do have some draft capital to put in play. With that being said, let's bring in Gabe Guerrero of Suns Valley Podcast to discuss more of the Phoenix Suns. So I'm here with Gabe Guerrero from Suns Valley Podcast. They do live streams during Suns games, wildly entertaining, and I'm bringing him on to talk about his Phoenix Suns. Gabe, what's going on, man?
My mic's going to make a little noise when I... Sorry. I just take a little break in there. Okay.
This is basically what your live streams are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I figured you'd cut all this out, you know. I'm good, man. I'm chilling. The Suns are doing a little bit better, pulling themselves out of the muck, so...
Yeah, for sure. You guys are in an interesting spot right now. Trade deadline coming up. Looks like the Suns are going to be major players, whether it's maybe trading for a big name or maybe selling off a couple of their pieces. So I'm going to ask you some questions about that. But first, I'm going to start with kind of the feel around the team right now, because from the outside looking in, there seems to be a lot of turmoil surrounding the organization right now. Ownership transition is happening. You got the sale from Sarver to Matt How do you say his name? Please educate me. Ishbia. Yeah, you got that whole situation. What are your thoughts on how the ownership situation might affect the trade deadline for the Suns?
Well, up until a couple of days ago, it was murky and it didn't look like anything was going to get done because of the three owner situation. But the new owner, Matt, with one T, has decided to come out and tell everyone, hey, let's be aggressive. I'm giving you guys in the front office the green light. So at least on his end, that's all cleared up now. And the feeling in Suns universe is that something is going to happen. We don't know what, but it really feels like something is going to happen trade-wise.
Something else that's been interesting to see play out over the past 7-8 months since the end of last season has been the dynamic between DeAndre Ayton and Monty Williams. It seems like there's a little turmoil there in that relationship from the outside looking in. What's your read into the dynamic between those two and the rest of the locker room as a whole?
Well, winning cures everything, as they say. And we've won a couple of games in a row. The energy is different with Cam Johnson back. But yeah, I've covered the Monty and Ayton beef all summer and this year. Something that DA said in the locker room after getting yelled at. I mean, he got screamed at by Monty. And Monty's one of the nicest, most church-goingest guys on the planet. You don't usually see Monty scream at anyone. But after that game, DA in the locker room said, we're a family. He's like our dad. He knows how to talk to his boys and get out of us what he needs to get out of us. That really calmed me down about the beef. I think the beef is a little bit overblown. The real issue is Monty Williams has no idea how to utilize any big man, including DA. He doesn't have any interest in utilizing DA properly. And then DA's kind of soft. So it's like they both bring their own faults to the problem that are making them butt heads a little bit. Monty wants him to be more aggressive and play a certain way, and that's not who Ayton is. It's just, it's kind of a non-fit. So it's not without possibility that Ayton could be one of the guys that gets moved because he just doesn't fit Monty's offense.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm intrigued to see is if he does end up somewhere else. Is he a much better offensive player? Is he used a lot more? That'll definitely be something intriguing if he does get dealt. I've always been curious to see how he does with a different organization, different head coach, and if he's utilized a little differently, a little more heavily, because he's definitely skilled, good finisher at the rim, but he obviously seems like a little bit more of a cog in the system there in Phoenix than maybe potentially being the featured guy, which he could be somewhere else. So obviously he's a large contract that can be used to get a lot. Young, big man. It's going to be interesting to see who's interested in him. With that being said, what direction do you think the Suns should head at the deadline? Do you think they should be buyers trying to finally get over the hump and win that championship? Do you think they should be sellers and play the long game, rebuild for the future? Or do you think they should sit out, maybe make a couple of small moves, but keep the team as is? What direction do you think they should go in?
The Suns have tied their hands by giving Chris Paul all of the money that we have. So going all in is really the only choice. We kind of have to throw good money after bad. I love Chris Paul. He's not that bad this year. He's not what he was last year, but he's not that bad. He just can't stay on the court. So going all in is going to look a little different. The most important thing for the Phoenix Suns to fix is the point guard lineup. Coach Monty does not like Dwayne Washington. He might be out sooner rather than later. Saban Lee has come in and completely stripped him of his job. I'm talking in the playoffs the moment Chris Paul goes down. It's going to be either Campaign, who's also all of a sudden just as injury prone as anyone on our roster. You don't want Shamet playing point guard if you don't have to. In the playoffs, we had him play a whole game of point guard against the Mavs. Weirdly, they won that game, but you don't want a lot of that. We have to find somebody, a Van Vliet, a insert point guard name that's not trash. We got to find something there. If that doesn't happen, I'll be completely happy with something like Kuzma or even bringing Kelly Oubre back. I'd die to have one of those three on the team. We just need bucket getters that don't rely on catch and shoot. Someone that can get their own buckets.
Speaking of Chris Paul, how much time do you think he has left in him playing at a starter level? Like how much time do the Suns have left to figure out the future of that point guard position?
They will be lucky if he lasts through the playoffs. The day he turned 37 years old, it's weird, but he just he aged rapidly. We'll be lucky to get through the year with him.
Other than Van Vliet, is there any names out there you like for that position?
Terry Rozier is a big draw for me. We went after him hard when he was leaving Boston originally. He was about ready to sign on the dotted line, but Michael Jordan literally called him. And how do you turn down Mike? I know I couldn't. And he went there for Michael Jordan. So if they're ready to move off of him, I love Terry Rozier in Monty's offense.
He seems like a guy that you could buy low on right now. He's kind of struggled this year, but the Hornets have been an absolute mess. Being able to get those types of guys at good value and then rehabilitate their career is what a lot of good organizations will do. That could definitely be a good option. I agree. And that's the nice thing about the Suns, too, is you guys have a lot of contracts that you can piece together that can match somebody like Terry Rozier's salary. Obviously, you got Dario Saric like $9-10 million a year, campaigns making $6 million. You got a lot of pieces in that salary range, which would make that sort of deal easy, because Rozier is making a little bit of a bag, but yeah, would be a good target off the bench, help you with that shot creation you said you needed. On top of that, who are some other big name players you think the Suns should target? You named a couple, but if you had to name your dream target or your most optimistic but realistic trade option, who would that be?
I'll give you 3 names that I think would really excite Suns fans. 1, John Collins. It seems like he's ready to part ways with Atlanta, or they're ready to part ways with him. I'll give you 4 names. Ice Trae. We need a point guard so bad, and I understand the problems that come along with him. We need a point guard so bad, I would do that too. Either of those guys. Jordan Clarkson having a really good year. I still want him on the team. I think Booker being injury prone as well. Jordan Clarkson coming off the bench. That's much stronger than just Landry Shamet. And then the other one, and I don't know how likely this is because I don't know what the Raptors want to do, but I have a dream of Pascal Siakam, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton on the same team. But I could live in a world where we were able to keep both twins, lose DA, and bring in Pascal. So it'd be, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Pascal, both twins.
Who are the both twins? I am not privy.
The twins? The
twins. Who are the twins?
The twins are Mikal and Cam Johnson.
Okay. Yeah. Mikal and Cam Johnson. Yeah, I don't know who the twins are.
Yeah, they're officially the twins. They've been known as the twins for a while.
Okay. And it's interesting with Toronto, too, is that's the other trade deadline preview that's going to drop with this. So if you're watching this, check out the Raptors one, because I think the Suns and the Raptors are the 2 biggest players at the deadline this year, because the Raptors have a lot of pieces that could be going elsewhere, a lot of really good pieces. Fred VanVleet was a guy you named earlier, and then Siakam, OG Anunoby's been rumors around him, but they could also be buyers. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. And then you guys obviously are a big buyer in the trade market, it seems like right now. It seems like the organization is going to go along with your wishes. Siakam would be, I think, a really good fit. I agree. And I feel like it'd probably take Ayton. I feel like they'd want a center. Their forward experiment hasn't really worked out too well this year. So at some point, I think they're going to say, all right, we need a center, especially a young one like Ayton. So in my opinion, if you guys pull off a really big blockbuster, that's who it'd be for. But I have an inkling that Toronto's going to keep both Siakam and Anunoby at the same time, and that's what's going to be interesting to see. I have a gut feeling, though, there's a chance that there's a deal between the Suns and the Raptors, whether it's VanVleet or Siakam.
I'd be happy with either. Mm-hmm. But I hear VanVleet's going to cost a lot to keep.
How much would you be comfortable paying a Fred VanVleet? He's making $21 million this year, player option. He'll probably opt out and get more. Would you be comfortable paying him $25-30 million a year? Because he has regressed a little bit this year. Would you be comfortable if that's an overpayment just so you had that solution to Chris Paul?
How old is he?
Like 28, 29?
How much are we paying Chris Paul?
Like 30 million-ish. Off the top of my head.
So you're saying how much for VanVleet? Like 20 what?
I have no idea what it will cost him. I'm just curious if you'd be okay overpaying him, just so you could find a solution to that Chris Paul long-term problem.
Absolutely. I would. I would. It's so important. It's so important. You saw how good Monty Williams' offense is. It's record breaking, at least in the Suns organization, 64 wins, when you have two guards that can punish you, both creating for others, but also being able to knock down shots. We need knockdown shooters, and Campaign is not that. Saban Lee is not that. And Dwayne Washington can't stop turning the ball over. If we want a title, and apparently we do because we're willing to rob a bank and give all the money to Chris Paul, then that's the position that needs to be fixed.
One final question. Cam Johnson is a free agent this offseason, and it's been reported that he turned down a 4-year offer of about $16 to $18 million a year. I'm wondering, what is the most that you would pay Cam Johnson to bring him back, assuming that it'd be more than that? Or if you're not comfortable paying him more than that, what would you be looking for in a trade for him?
Due to his injury history, and it's not just the knee. He only played 8 games this season to start, and I want to say in 4 of those games, or 5, he went out injured in all of them. Just leaves the game, can't come back in. So if there is a tradable player from the Suns' perspective, I think they would move him, because combined with his injury history, he's also one of the older young players that we have. We drafted him when he was 24. He's now shortened the length of his career expectancy by having the version of the meniscus surgery that just snips it away and you get to come back earlier, but you're pretty much guaranteed, like Eric Bledsoe encountered, to have arthritis in your knee. He's not the type of player that relies on the bounce that Eric Bledsoe had, but who wants your player to have arthritis in their knee?
Absolutely. As a Blazer fan, Brandon Roy did the same thing and his career went off the rails. I think it would have went off the rails anyway, but I know exactly what you're talking about because that's what B-Roy did.
So it's a tough call because Cam Johnson is awesome and we love him, but you don't get something for nothing. And if you were playing heartlessly and not caring about how much you like a player, you're just doing it from a business perspective, I think that would be the guy to move. So he could go at the trade deadline if we're able to pull some sort of better player, but it's going to tear Suns Nation in half. I mean, they are going to be hurting because they might love Cam the most. As far as what I would pay him, if we didn't trade him and he makes it all the way through the year, healthy, plays through the playoffs, at the rate that he's been playing, the skill level he's been playing at, yeah, I'd give him over $20 million a year. I'd give him over $20 million a year. Probably no problem.
Seems like the Suns have an owner that is comfortable overpaying. It'll be interesting to see if the new owner there does try and pull back the checkbook in future years. Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of good power forwards out there. You got, of course, Jay Crowder, who was the starter last year, Cam Johnson, who was the starter this year, and it seems like there's a chance that neither of them are there in Phoenix, especially Jay Crowder after the trade deadline. Luckily, there seems to be a ton of power forwards available, so it'll be interesting to see if the Suns are able to make a splash for one of those guys. John Collins, Pascal Siakam, a lot of options out there. Anyway, thank you, Gabe, for joining us. You can catch Gabe at Suns Valley Podcast on YouTube. Live watch parties, they're always off the rails and a ton of fun. I'll make appearances there once in a while and sober up the show a little bit. And then you can follow him on Twitter. The link to that is down in the description box below. Follow his co-host on Twitter as well. Link's also down there. And with that, that's a wrap for this interview. Thank you for joining us, Gabe.
Thank you, and good luck to your Blazers.
Thanks, man. Anyway, once again, thank you to Gabe for joining us. You can find Suns Valley Podcast on YouTube by searching Suns Valley Podcast or by clicking the link in the description box below. And I also put his Twitter down there if you want to follow him on the Twitter. Now let's look at a couple trade ideas. This first trade idea I had for the Toronto Raptors in my first trade deadline preview, and that's Fred VanVleet going to the Suns, Jay Crowder, Dario Saric, and a 2023 Phoenix first going to the Raptors. This would be a risky play for the Phoenix Suns as Fred VanVleet could walk in free agency this year, but as we talked about with Gabe, the Suns need a long-term solution to that point guard position. Fred VanVleet was an all-star last season and having a bit of a down year this year, but I could see him thriving under Monty Williams and being that long-term fit next to Devin Booker as somebody that can defend and knock down threes. Jay Crowder isn't playing right now, and Dario Saric is a fringe rotation player at best. The real asset in this trade that the Suns have to part with is that 2023 first-round pick. However, if the Suns are serious about trying to win this year and can trade that future first and still have other draft capital and salary pieces left over to upgrade somewhere else, I think that would be a good start to the trade deadline for the Suns. It'd be interesting to see what the Suns would do in terms of the starter at that point guard position. They would maybe want to start Fred VanVleet to try and make sure he's happy so that they can keep him in free agency this offseason. But Chris Paul in a bench role seems kind of weird. That decision might be the toughest part of this trade for the Phoenix Suns. Here's an example of a potential follow-up trade which could see the Suns upgrading their bench by getting Alec Burks. They give up a 2026 first-round pick as well as a couple seconds on top of some salary to match to get Alec Burks, and then Rodney McGruder's thrown in from the Pistons as well. A bench consisting of Alec Burks and one of Chris Paul or Fred VanVleet would be maybe the best perimeter bench in the league. Burks is one of the best bench scorers in the league, and he comes on a cheap contract, so this is a good idea for the Suns. Of course, the Suns could make a play for Pascal Siakam if he's available. Maybe DeAndre Ayton goes to the Raptors, Siakam goes to the Suns. There are many different trade ideas that are possible with this Suns team. Let me know some of your trade ideas down in the comment section below. Let me know your thoughts on the Suns as they approach the trade deadline, and let me know what you think of anything said in this video. If you're a Suns fan, what are you hoping your team does in terms of roster moves in the next couple of weeks? Make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, it helps me out, and I'm out of here until the next trade deadline preview. Peace.